Welcome into the sweat. Brendan Glasheen joining you today, pinch hitting for Jesse Cofield. It's great to have you with us. We're talking DFS and sports betting for the next 60 minutes. We have plenty to get to in the NFL, also Major League Baseball, tonight's slate, and also looking at the Fortinet Championship in PGA. Want to welcome in our guest to start the show, Pierce Dietrich, as well as AJ Scholes coming in here from DraftKings. What's up, fellas? Good to have you with us. Before we get to that, one day away from week 2. Isn't that great? Week 2 is already starting up tomorrow. Thursday Night Football pits the Giants against the Washington football team. DraftKings has a featured showdown contest. It pays out $1 million to the winner. That's not all. Taking down this contest will also get you a ticket to our DraftKings Tournament of Champions live final in January, which is another shot at $1 million. That's the top prize. Head on over to the DraftKings lobby, draft your lineups, and take your shot at becoming a millionaire in week 2. All right, Pierce and AJ, they are still here. Thank goodness. NFL spin move time. We're going to put a spin on the latest news around the National Football League, news and notes. Let's start with Thursday night's action. There is news that does affect how we look at this matchup on Thursday. It's the Washington football team's week 1 starter, Ryan Fitzpatrick, down and out with a hip injury, Pierce. So Taylor Heineke's taking over for Washington. Saquon Barkley has been limited at Giants practice, and Evan Ingram has been banged up with a calf injury. This game has the lowest total in the week 2 slate at 40.5. Can these two teams, Pierce, beat up on one another?
I'll take a chance on this extremely low under. The under is 18-9 in Washington's last 27 games. So they are a team that likes to go under. We know that New York is not really a potent offense. Both of these offenses are questionable to begin with. You throw in the injuries, and you just where are the points going to come from? On top of that, Washington defense, we know, is the real deal. New York probably is taking a step forward. We didn't really see much of that in the first game, but they should be a decent defense here. The question is that worries me is that if Washington's defense plays so well that they allow Washington to score a lot of points on offense because they're set up for good spots, and then the Giants get some garbage points, that's how I could see this thing going over. But if both defenses just play good, I just don't see how these offenses can score. There's no one here.
AJ, some injury concerns. It's a short week. Do you think 40.5 is compelling enough to hit the over?
I don't. I'm with Pierce. I think the under's the good look here. And honestly, even with, if Fitzpatrick and Barkley were playing, maybe, but I still might fade the under. Or take the under rather on this game. Look, and part of the fact, the Giants D is a big liability here. Obviously, they could give up a decent amount of yards to Antonio Gibson, but I agree with Pierce. I don't know where necessarily the offense is coming from. I mean, maybe we get some points out of the Washington D. I guess that's certainly a possibility as well. A pick six or something is not outside the realm of possibility with Daniel Jones under center. So maybe there's a spot, but I think the under is a safe play.
Let's go to the Seahawks and the Titans. Seattle has ruled out running back Rashad Penny for week 2 against Tennessee. Chris Carson has certainly proved himself as the lead back there in Seattle. Week 1, 16 attempts on the ground, 91 yards. No Penny in the mix this Sunday, AJ. What are your thoughts on Chris Carson? $6,100 against that Tennessee defense.
Yeah, I like this as a good value spot here. You look at some of the guys that are in that similar price range, Jacobs, Montgomery, they're not necessarily going to get the same workload share that Carson's projected to get at this point. Now, Tennessee's D did give up 19.9 points to running backs on DraftKings last week. That's about middle of the road in terms of the field here. The only reason I would maybe not take him is because you can get a Zeke Elliott at 62 or a Najee Harris at 6,300. But it's certainly a value spot that I'll be looking at it. And I think there is something to be said for him getting that lion's share of the workload.
Pierce, thoughts on Chris Carson, 6,100. Interested?
Yeah, I am. And Penny being out isn't the biggest deal. It definitely helps a little. We always worry, though, if Pete Carroll loves to run the ball, and yet this team seems to pass quite a lot. And they have these big chunk plays, which take away from possible rushing yards. They take away from possible scores. But at the same time, they also set up a lot of goal line carries, which can benefit Carson in this game. You mentioned the rushing stats. He was also working out of the backfield as a receiving back, caught 3 passes. That's what we really like to see. And we could see some more of that. Seattle's offensive line played pretty well in that last game. So the less that Russ scrambles, the more you'll see the dump down option to the receiving running back. Also, they're going to face the Titans, an easier matchup this week for the Seahawks. And AJ mentioned the points that were allowed, but remember, last week was a passing game for the Cardinals. If Titans would have faced a rushing team, probably would have given up a little more fantasy points, probably will give up more fantasy points this week.
Seattle's a 5-point favorite at home. That totals at 54 points right now, something to keep in mind. So after a fumble in week one, we move to another running situation in Tampa. After a fumble in week one against the Cowboys, Ronald Jones benched by Bruce Arians for the rest of that game. That feels like light years ago, doesn't it, that game? Apparently now, Ronald Jones is out of the doghouse because Bruce Arians said he will start this week against Atlanta. Start. It's a juicy matchup against the Falcons, who got run over by the Eagles last Sunday. So what's the approach, if there is one, Pierce, to week two's Tampa Bay running back situation?
I'm not playing this game. I refuse to play the game where, we did it. I wish this game was 5 years ago. We tried to predict what Bruce Arians was going to do last week. We said, oh, yeah, well, they've got a great defense, pretty adequate running game. They'll play defense. No reason for old man Brady to pass the ball 40 times. He threw it 50 times. So I'm not the person to ask what Bruce Arians is going to do. And I don't think anyone knows. And here's the problem, though. Let's say we have a good idea of what Bruce Arians is going to do, whether it's Fournette or whether they're going to go with Ron Jones. If we know, then it loses all of its GPP appeal. So if you want to take a chance on it this early in the season, go for it. I don't know who it's going to be.
Not to mention, AJ, Leonard Fournette had a ball go off his hands that led to an interception from Tom Brady. So are you like Pierce here, touching these running backs in Tampa?
I'm absolutely not. Look, I agree with everything Pierce said. And the fact of the matter is we're talking about, a committee approach here. Fournette did see the bulk of the snaps in the last game. He was on the field for 42 offensive snaps compared to 6 for Jones, 17 for Giovanni Bernard. But at the end of the day, if Ronald Jones starts, maybe his fumble doesn't come until later in the game and then he's benched again. I mean, it's certainly possible. There's just too many question marks here for who's going to carry the workload here. Like I said, 64% of the starts for Fournette in game one, but is Ronald Jones going to flip that? There's so many questions. It's hard to use any of these guys at this point.
Okay, sorry about that. Having some internet issues here on my end. Let's go to running back Raheem Moster for the Niners. He took to social media. I was really sad about this. He took to social media to announce season-ending knee surgery coming for him. Fantasy players had high hopes for Mostert against the Lions in week one. He left the game after just 2 carries, replaced by Eli Mitchell. He went on to rush for over 100 yards and a touchdown. He's an appealing option, I would think, against the Eagles. $5,000 on the Sunday slate. AJ, taking a shot on Mitchell and rostering him?
Yeah, I think you have to at least consider it at a minimum here. I think obviously potentially a better defense here facing off with the Colts. They only allowed 13.5 fantasy points last week to running backs here. So I do think, there's a possibility that it'll be a tougher matchup. I don't know if hoping for 100 here is the right approach, but it's certainly 16.5 rather. I wanted to get that right, but I don't think it's necessarily the right approach to worry too much about that when you consider the fact that he's so inexpensive. He's going to see the bulk of the snaps, and that's really what you're looking for in terms of a guy this far down. Who's going to get the touches? Who's going to get the opportunities? And at $5,000, I don't see how you get away from using him, even if you consider the Colts to have a better defense than what they faced last week.
Pierce, what are you sensing here with Mitchell? $5,000, will he be chalky?
He probably will be. Let me play the role of the worrying too much. So last week when he came into the game, he just slid right into Mostert's role. The script, the game plan against a pretty weak defense in Detroit was to give the ball to Mostert. And so when he came into the game, he basically took that entire game plan. Well, this week it's going to be an entirely new script. It's not going to be a basic design for Mostert that he'll slide into. They're going to use all 3 running backs. We'll probably see Trey Sermon be active this week, a different game plan. Again, I could be worrying too much. It is San Francisco, and you usually can trust whichever running back that they're going to roll with, which would have been last week's Mostert, which ended up being Mitchell. but we could possibly see a committee like we talked about with the other teams be rolled out in this game. And if that's the case, then maybe he should be a little less chalky.
All right, got to injury. Jerry Jeudy, week 1 injury, he's out. Going to be a value play here. Week 2 against the Jags. Are you looking elsewhere on the Broncos?
I'll jump in. I like KJ Hamler, but I don't think he's that great. Again, this is going to be another chalky value play, but how much action is he going to get in this game against Jacksonville? How much? So is Teddy Bridgewater going to run up the score, or will Denver just run the ball? I think you're going to see a lot more just running the ball. I don't think they're going to take a lot of big shots. That's really where a lot of the points came last week, was these deep throws to Brandon Cooks. I don't know if Hamler's going to play that role. I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater is going to take those shots. Again, he might be a little too chalky for my liking.
How about you, AJ? KJ Hamler, value?
Well, it's certainly, something that I would consider in a bigger GPP. Again, as Pierce alluded to, your drafted percentage here is probably going to be pretty high when you consider he's coming in at 3,800. But if anybody, I think Courtland Sutton is maybe the guy that'll get a few more targets with Jerry Jeudy out. But again, he's significantly more expensive at 5,200. So it's worth a look, consideration there for Hamler in a GPP. If you're playing more of a cash game, I might fade and go with Sutton instead, just for a little more security, because I do think he's a little more established there.
All right, gents, thank you very much. We're talking baseball next with Gary and Thorne and Matt Meiselman. In the meantime, let's go to the latest episode of the Unreasonable Odds podcast. Steve Buchanan and Julian Edlow, they are breaking down one of their favorite bets on the Week 2 slate.
My big play for Week 2 is going to be, and it's pretty much the same value whether you want to money line parlay it or 6-point tease it, is the Patriots and Broncos.
Okay.
The Patriots and Broncos are both getting wins in Jacksonville and New York. I'm very confident in it. It's not the heavy favorite money line parlay from the old Panel B podcast. I'm not quite bringing that back. Just 2 teams, keeping it simple. That'll be my big play. I'll probably, by the time you're listening to this podcast, I'll probably have a best bets article up with that play. So that's the one that jumped out to me as the I don't know if they're square, but just the spots that I'm really all about in Week 2.
So if you want to add those to a teaser, because we always love that, I have no problem throwing the Buccaneers if you want to make it a 3 pick teaser.
No, we don't want to make it a 3 team.
Why?
Because we're not as greedy as you.
Well, I'm greedy. So I'm going to add the Buccaneers to make it plus money at plus 160. You get the Buccaneers down to 6.5. Why not? The Buccaneers aren't going to beat the Falcons by a touchdown, by over a touchdown. Come on. And this isn't out yet. So let me ask you this. The team total is not out for the Buccaneers as of yet. The over under in this game is 52. What would you guess is going to be the team total for the Buccaneers? I was thinking 30.5.
Well, I mean, it's just math, but I'm not good at math. I have to do it. So, I mean, yeah, it's just going to be 32.5.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
I said 30.5.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 32.5, 31.5 for the Bucks.
Would you be taking the over? Would you still think the over's in play? Like they should be smashing this team.
At home against the Falcons, the Eagles just scored 32
right
against them. So I mean, in theory, yes, but this is one of those Week 2 things that you handicap as, well, the Eagles scored 32 on the road, so the Bucks are going to score more than 32 at home, and then the Bucks win the game.
Yeah.
31-3.
All right, we're talking baseball now. Welcome in Gary and Thorne, Matt Meiselman, both work at DraftKings as contributors. Fellas, good to see you. We're talking MLB price check right now. Favorite DFS plays at the following price points. Matt, I got to go to Gary in first, and I give Matt credit for bringing this to my attention. Robbie Ray is on the mound tonight. So who is the pitcher over 8K that you are going to, Gary and Thorne?
Well, unfortunately, he is pitching this afternoon, so he's not on the main.
Oh, right. He's on the night.
Can't talk about my boy Robbie Ray. Bring it up for Steve Buchanan in just out of respect. But I'll say tonight, interesting pitching slate. There's not a ton of just high upside Robbie Ray-esque options above $8,000, or at least in that normal $10,000 range. So I think the 8K range is just two names, but I think both of them have some merit to be very, very viable DFS plays for tonight. I think Cal Quantrill has been fantastic. His last 11 starts as a sub-2 ERA in that span of time, and is going up against a Twins team that's just struggled to hit so far in the month of September. But I think my favorite play would have to be Yanoa of the Braves. I mean, you look at any pitcher who is going up against the Rockies on the road, that is really a staple of fantasy baseball at this point. They are essentially dead last in every single major offensive category in all of baseball on the road. But Yanoa's been really good since coming off the IL. He's held opponents to a 258 WOBA within that span of time. And for the season, he's got a 27% strikeout rate and a 3.24 xFIP. So I think he just brings enough to the table to sort of elevate the already high ceiling, high floor combination that just facing the Rockies on the road tends to give a pitcher.
Matt, pitcher over 8K for tonight.
I don't really love these pay up options, and there are a couple that are good, but I think the ownership just kind of aligns with the guys that it's supposed to. Maybe leverage is easier to get off the lower tier price pitchers, but in the high end range, like Julio Urias probably will have some amount of popularity. I think the same is true for McGill. And if you want to pivot to guys like Minaya, Musgrove, or Urquidy, you probably will get them low owned, but I just think they're far worse options. So I think just sticking with Julio Urias, who probably deserves to be the highest priced pitcher on the slate. He's been really good lately. His matchup is pretty solid at home against Arizona. It's arguably the best matchup on the slate for these pitchers, actually. So I think even though he's overpriced for his normal talent level, the matchup is good enough that you kind of just play him. And it's not that he'll be super contrarian or anything. It's just that he's in a tier with a bunch of other pitchers who I think none of whom will be that contrarian, and he's just the best of those choices. So I'm looking to get different from cheaper pitchers, and I think just paying up for Urias is totally fine.
Matt, let's go right back to you. How about a pitcher that's under 8K that you have interest in?
Yeah, so the field is going to love Ranger Suarez at home against the Cubs. And it's not that it's a bad spot for him. I think he's probably a slightly above average starting pitcher. The Cubs are a bad offense. So it sets up well for him at 7,200. The problem is, I think he could be 50+% owned on this slate, and he's just not deserving of that. So if you want to pivot, Mike Minor, 6,800, is in a much worse matchup at home against the Oakland A's, but Minor and Suarez are actually pretty comparable pitchers. And the fact that Minor's matchup is so much worse is probably going to dictate that he's a fifth as popular as Suarez is. So I think making that move to go to a guy who's just in a bit worse of a spot, but is a similar quality pitcher, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I think Minor comes in pretty contrarian because Suarez is priced right around him.
Arian, favorite pitcher under 8K?
Yeah, like Matt said, if you're playing in a cash game setting, I think Suarez is going to be insanely popular. He's going to be popular in tournaments as well, just because his last four starts, he has posted the 1.77 FIP. His strikeout rate has kind of jumped up to around 28%, and he still brings that elite 60% ground ball rate. Factor in the Cubs. Again, I like him. I think he's going to do well tonight. I think he's probably going to hit 3x value or at least 2.5x value. But yeah, the ownership is going to be a little tricky. So if you want to go in the just complete opposite direction in terms of someone who is going to get absolutely no love tonight and you're just throwing a dart, Griffin Jax is kind of interesting. He's sub 6K. He's been pitching terrible. I can't emphasize that enough. His last four starts, his ERA is above 10. However, he has demonstrated some ability to rack up strikeouts at the major league level, and Cleveland just can't hit. Since the beginning of September, obviously they were no hit this past weekend, but they are dead last in baseball in WOBA and WRC plus since September 1st. So if you just want to bank on a team that has not been able to produce against anyone and that matchup turning a bad pitcher into a viable option, I do think Jax might have some value on tonight's slate.
Gary, and who's a hitter over $5,000 that you find super attractive and just got to get him in there?
I think I'm going to go with Jose Altuve, just as sort of the one option I have with an Astros hitter above 5K. This is really about Kohei Arihara, who I've just been waiting to stack against since all the way back in April and May. It was just so successful then. Then he got hurt. You never want to see anyone get hurt, especially when there's such an easy stacking opportunity. He really checks every box of the type of pitcher that I want to load up on offensive pieces against, specifically his zone contact rate. If you cannot get swings and misses in the strike zone, you are not going to be a successful pitcher at the major league level. His zone contact rate, small sample, just 9 starts, 92.5%. That would be the highest by a wide margin among qualified pitchers. He's been specifically terrible against right-handed batters. They are hitting .304 with a .671 slugging percentage and a .426 WOBA against him so far this season. So an elite right-handed bat like Jose Altuve should have a really nice night when the Astros are probably going to get their offense back on track against the Rangers.
Hitter over 5K, Matt Meiselman. Who do you got?
So I have no problem with any of the Astros hitters. I think it's a great spot for them. The only issue is that I think that they could be the highest owned offense on the slate, or at least one of the top 2 or 3. And the same goes for the Yankees in Baltimore. It is John Means, but it's still Baltimore. And I think the Yankees still garner a lot of attention. So I know this is going to come as no surprise to people who watch this frequently, but the Dodgers are, again, my favorite team to pay up for. And Mookie Betts at 6,100. It's just he's so much more expensive than the other priorities on the slate, and it is a good spot for the Dodgers. Merrill Kelly is probably an average pitcher. The Dodgers have this elite offense that hasn't produced a ceiling game in a while. I mean, they've been scoring 7 or 8 runs, a couple of times, but they haven't produced a double-digit run-scoring game in a while. I think it's just a matter of time that happens. So because Mookie is 6,100, I just don't think that anyone can really prioritize him when the Astros are cheaper, the Yankees are cheaper, and we'll get to the White Sox too, who are a lot cheaper. So paying up for the Dodgers, I think, is the way to go in GPPs.
Oh, look at you teasing your next play. So under 5K, who's a hitter? Is it a White Sox?
Well, it would be in cash games. Luis Robert and Jose Abreu are in the low 4,000s, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think you do kind of need to stay away from them if you're trying to win a bigger tournament, because the field is going to go to the White Sox. I think even more so than the Yankees and Astros, but it's really those 3 teams. So for a cheaper offense, I really like the Orioles spot tonight. And this will depend a bit on if Trey Mancini and Pedro Severino are in the lineup. Both left the game early last night. But even if they're not, you still have Austin Hayes at 3,200. And I don't even mind Cedric Mullins at 4,700. He may even be my preferred option because lefty spot against Nestor Cortez, I think that he ends up being really contrarian. But Mullins at home, Mullins is a really good hitter. The home matchup is just a boost for normal home field advantage reasons, but Baltimore is also a great place to hit. And Cortez, since becoming a starter, has been probably a slightly below average pitcher with FIP and XFIP numbers that are mid to high 4s. Most of his good numbers this year came as a reliever, actually, before they converted him to a starter. But he's been able to strand runners at an unsustainable rate, and his ERA is lower than it should be. So I actually like this spot for the Orioles. I think they could do really well as a stack. And Mullins at 4,700, I just think no one plays him.
Gary, and a cheap hitter for us.
Yeah, I guess I'm less concerned about ownership here just because with all my Griffin Jack shares, I've probably separated myself from the field. Let's just talk about the Yankees for a second. They deserve to be discussed a little bit. They've got some cheap options. It seems like they're going to try to shoehorn Luke Voit in as much as possible. That makes a lot of sense. He's been one of their best hitters in recent months, and it's been a struggle to get him in there with Stanton needing to DH more than 50% of the time. But if Voigt's in there tonight, he's $3,600. Since the beginning of July, he's only had 135 plate appearances between injuries and just not starting a whole lot, but he's got a 143 WRC plus. He's got an opposite hand matchup against John Means, who John Means is bad. Like, let's just kind of cut through it right now. He's not a good pitcher. And I know he was an all-star 2 seasons ago. I know he threw a no-hitter. Great. He's bad. All of his underlying statistics are absolutely terrible. If you go back to May the 19th, which is a relatively large sample within this 2021 season, 5.71 FIP. He's giving up 2.4 opponent home runs per 9. He's bad, and the Yankees are going to hit him very, very hard tonight. So I would agree with Matt in the sense that Chicago in particular, just because of how absurdly cheap they are going to be popular. The Yankees are going to be popular too, but I don't think it's too big an issue getting a taste every now and again in particular builds.
All right, gents, thank you. And Gary, and enjoy Robbie Ray this afternoon.
Thank you. I will.
Hopefully you enjoy it. Okay. In that case, let's move on to the NFL. Again, first, Ross Tucker, joined by Emery Hunt this week on his college football draft podcast to break down a couple of marquee matchups in college football this weekend.
The marquee game, Alabama, Florida, although Alabama is favored by 15.5. I mean, did Florida drop off that much, Emery?
You would think, but it's just the fact that Bama is that good and Bryce Young is that good. And I don't care who they have at quarterback, even though I like how they run their 2-quarterback system. It works for them. And we don't know if Richardson's going to be 100% healthy with that hamstring, but it doesn't really matter in this game, to be honest, because Alabama's offense is so consistent and so much firepower. And I've learned so quickly not to bet against Alabama. I did so in week 1. I took Miami in the points. Wrong. But at least this one, I'm laying those points with Bama.
Laying 15.5 against Florida.
Yes, Florida's offense, is good, but they have some inconsistencies, stretches of inconsistency in the passing game, and you don't have any opportunity to waste possessions against Bama. You better maximize all of them, 7 or 3.
So I got so many questions right now. Number one, how did Florida, just losing Trask and Kyle Pitts and Tony, they just dropped off that much?
Is more so about the fact that they lose Tony and also Pitts. It's not Kyle Trask, because you look at what they have in that 2-quarterback system they use. Both Emory Jones and Richardson are tremendous. They play within their own skill set. Richardson probably has more dynamic running ability. Emory Jones has played steady, and more people are clamoring for Richardson, but you're going to have to use both against Bama, and both are mobile guys. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Saban adjusts and that defense adjusts to what both guys bring to the table. But again, Richardson pulled his hamstring on that 60-something plus yard touchdown run last week against South Florida. So we don't know how healthy he's going to be. So they're going to force Florida to play one-dimensional, and I think that's going to be easy pickings for Bama to cover that spread.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the studs in the game, including Alabama cornerback Josh Jobe.
Solid corner, the next in line of a guy that's going to go probably in that second-round range for Alabama. Good man skills. You want to see a little bit more instinctiveness coming from him. Yeah, it's just a personal thing because the guy's playing phase. I always have a tough time watching that because I grew up and was under the understanding that, you got to find the hip, turn, and find the football. But I understand why guys playing phase and play through their hands. I get it. It's just an adjustment for me as an evaluator, but he's a solid cornerback prospect.
On the other side, you've got Florida linebacker Jeremiah Moon.
He has good athleticism, man. I feel like he reminds me of a Quincy Roche, someone that can play off the ground, good length, can chase down the run going away, can be a pass rushing presence in some situations. You just want to see it all come together consistently. And if he can have a standout game against Alabama, you know how it only takes one game against a really good team to really catapult your draft stock. So I think he's someone to watch in this game because he does have a lot of work-withable skills.
All right, let's move on to the big night game, the Kirk Herbstreit game, 7:30 at Penn State. It's a whiteout game, which is always incredible. I think it's the best atmosphere in certainly college football and probably all of football because it's better than any NFL atmosphere. I don't know. There's just something about the fact that the stands go straight up and all the white and the lights. It's just magical. I've been to a couple of them, and Penn State's hosting Auburn in this one, Emery. My question is, I don't know a ton about Auburn. I know they always have front seven guys on D. They always have running backs, and it feels like Bo Nix has already been the quarterback there for a while. Penn State's favored by 6. That's a little bit higher than I thought it would be, but they've looked good the first couple of weeks. I know a lot about Penn State. What do you think about that spread?
It's interesting. You're right. That's a pretty big spread considering how well Auburn has played. Granted, it's been against teams that they should have blown out, which they did, 60 points in both. But I feel like this should be a 3-point spread. So for that reason, I'm taking Auburn in the points just off that alone. And plus, Auburn, under Brian Harsin has done a solid job in retransforming that offense a little bit and making it a little bit more conducive to Bo Nix's skill set, which ties right into Bo Nix. This is set up for him perfectly. This is one of these moxie games. And if he has a good game here, remember it was a hot take earlier in the season where someone said that Bo Nix could be the number one overall pick or number one quarterback in the draft class, and everybody laughed. But you sit back and think about it, like it only take one moxie game, one Joe Kane, put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner type game. This is it. You got 6-point underdogs on the road, whiteout game. And if his uniform gets dirty and one of his touchdowns that he has is a rushing touchdown where he's diving to the pylon, man, sign Bo Nix up for the Heisman Trophy and number one overall pick, because this is the type of game where narratives are built and legacies are made. So I'm excited to see this. So I think it's going to be a really good game, all jokes aside. I'm taking Auburn in the points, but Bo Nix under center in this new offense has played really well and efficient, which has been the issue for him so far this season. So this is going to be his toughest test yet.
All right, we're getting you set for week 2 in the NFL. Let's welcome in our panel on this fine Wednesday. Julian Edlow, Reed Fowler from the DraftKings studio, and Jeff Ulrich. NFL over under. Are you taking the over or under? Yeah, Julian. Yeah, because if you were in the studio, you'd be thinking you're all fancy too. So we're going to give Reed a little second of credit for getting off his butt.
Oh my goodness. Somebody went to work. I was in the studio last Wednesday. Big whoop.
Yeah, well, you're too busy to get off your butt and go to the studio. We're going to go to you first. Highest total.
Literally just said I was there last week. You're ruining the segment.
Cowboys, Chargers, it doesn't matter. We move on. 55.5 is the total for Cowboys, Chargers. Dallas, nice week 1 performance against Tampa. Chargers, they beat Washington. Okay, lots of travel here for the Chargers. You going over or under there? Encyclopedia Edlow.
All right, well, I'm not going to bet on it, but I lean to the over. Despite the Chargers being 10-4 to the under in their last 14 at home, and a low-scoring showing against Washington, but that was on the road in week 1 against a defensive team that lost their quarterback in the middle of that game. So that one turned into a little bit more of a grinder. What we saw in that Thursday night game is that this Dallas offense looked the part. They looked ready, put up some points on the road where they generally do not put up points. Dallas has scored more than 10 points per game less in 2 consecutive home seasons in road games, and yet they were able to keep up with Tampa there in the opener. I think they'll be able to put up points here on a pretty good Chargers defense, and that means that Justin Herbert and company are going to have to keep up against what is not a great Dallas defense. So I think this one has points written on it.
How about you, Reed, thinking over after seeing what we saw out of Dak last Thursday?
Yeah, this one's close. To Julian's point, as underdogs, Cowboys are 5-0, hitting the over right in their last 5 games. And so if you're going with those trends, then yeah, but I'm surprised that Julian didn't pull out the 84% of the cash right now is on the under. Usually that's a Julian Edlow stat. He didn't rattle that one off. So, like, if you're going with the sharp money, if you're going with the quote-unquote early money, then that does lead to the under. There is the scare of Cowboys not in Jerry's world, not in their stadium. When they get off of that, it gets a little bit scary, a la like the New Orleans Saints. But, if you want that number now, right, if you want to take that number now and the under at 55, right, it's already coming down. Earlier today, even yesterday, it was at 55.5. So I do like the under a little bit. I think this is a lot of points. I do think that Dak, Prescott, and Justin Herbert can, and they have put up a ton of points in the past, but I'm going the under.
Yeah, Jeff, it's creeped down to 55 right now on the DK Sportsbook. What do you think, an over or under?
I mean, I don't know why you'd want to bet on the under in a Dallas Cowboys game. I know this total is big and it's early in the year and people might be getting scared off here. But, again, we saw this trend last year at the start of the year. The offenses really clicked the first 3 or 4 weeks, and we had a lot of overs hit. And, again, you've got 2 teams here. They were both, ranked in top half of the league in pace of play. I think Dallas was right up there, may have been first last year. Dallas ran past the ball 58 times week 1. I don't think that's going to change that much. Julian alluded to the Chargers, kind of week 1 game against Washington, had a lot of weird things going on. I think that's likely what's scaring people off the most here. We've got 2 elite quarterbacks, though. One really bad defense. That's usually a mix for a shootout. I know the total's big. Maybe you wait for it to get to 54, but there's no way I'm taking the under here. You have to go over on Dallas right now.
Reed, the Titans are visiting the Seahawks in week 2. The total is at 54. Tennessee looks to rebound after putting up just 13 points, and they gave up a ton of points to the Arizona team. They got sacked a bunch. Seattle put up 28, a convincing win in Indianapolis. You're going over or under 54, Seattle, Tennessee.
Yeah, again, this is kind of to what Jeff was mentioning about Dallas. I get that, right? And if you go with that same logic, Seattle, what they did in the first 4 or 5 games, you would like to or be inclined to go with the over. I get that. But I'm still going on the under here. I do think that it is a little bit of an overreaction. Look, Russell Wilson is one of the best deep ball passers in the NFL. We saw that on display against Indy. That's why I liked them last week. But at the same time, if you take a look at this team in Tennessee, I think they're going to feature Derrick Henry a lot more, even if it's going to the strength of Seattle's defense, which is their run defense. I still think that you have to establish the run. You have to establish Derrick Henry early. And I do think if that's the case, then this has a lower pace to it. Even though both of these teams scored at a high clip, especially early in the season, especially Tennessee, I'm still inclined to take the under here a little bit. This number's a little bit too high. 52, 53 is where I have it. So I got a point under what it's at right now.
Jeff, I'm not sure where you're going on this. You're high on Tennessee, but you also want Russ to win the MVP award. Are we getting points in this one or what?
Dude, I mean, again, another team, like, why would you want to bet an under in a Tennessee Titans game? I mean, seriously. I threw out this stat last week, and we'll just update it. 27 regular season games that Ryan Tannehill started for the Titans now. 22, 4-1 to the over for the Titans.
Wow.
What we found out about the Titans, maybe I did like them preseason, their secondary still stinks. They had the 7th worst yards per pass attempt allowed last week to Kyler Murray. Now they're going up against Russell Wilson, this newfangled Shane Waldron offense, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. There's going to be points here. I hope they do run Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry's a really good offensive player. But no, I don't want to take the under on this at all. This one is easy over for me as well.
Jules, Titans, Seahawks, please include a percentage to appease Reed.
Well, I mean, first of all, in terms of following the money, number one, it's early in the week, so a lot can change. Number two, I followed the money, 92% of the money on Green Bay minus 3.5. How'd that work for me last week?
Well, because you're a moron.
Oops. So, like, moron, Reed, you just gave the numbers to follow the money. This is just like Dallas and the Chargers. This is an over or a pass for me. If you took the over in Arizona, Tennessee last week, you looked super sharp because you needed 1 point to get there going into the fourth quarter, or 1 point in the last 19 minutes of the game, and you get there, and guess what? You lost. So that was the first awful beat of the season with no points in the last 19 minutes of that game. But like Jeff said, the Titans are just a team that you're not betting an under with right now. He used my number for Tannehill overs as the starter of the Titans, and that's the only number that you need to know. You can't possibly be betting these unders, and the over kind of ties in with what we saw from Russell Wilson in that offense on the road last week. So this one's going to be right up there. Is it going to be another bad beat with a very close under? Maybe, but I think you can only look at the over in this game.
Let's go to the Falcons. They are visiting the Bucs with a game total of 52, and right now Tampa's a 12-point favorite. So the people who set the lines, they really love Tampa in this game. Atlanta managed just 6 points in week 1 at home against Philadelphia. Now they're on the road in Tampa. With the way Atlanta looked, Jeff, do you think there's any chance this game hits over 52 points?
I mean, look, I don't want to be like the over guy who's just like, smash the over, guys. We got to take over in every game. But how do you take the under in this game? I mean, the one thing we know about Tampa Bay is regardless of how much they're ahead, they're going to throw the ball. They threw the ball 50 times in week 1. They were ahead the entire game. They were 7th in pass attempts per game. It's a Bruce Arians offense. Then you've got Atlanta, who just made Jalen Hurts look like, you know, the child of Joe Montana and Mike Vick. Like, this Atlanta defense, Atlanta just stinks. And the one thing, again, which has me just leaning towards the over, Tampa Bay's secondary really isn't that good. They let Amari Cooper go for a bunch of yards. Calvin Ridley probably gets off the mat here and then puts up, you know, Atlanta probably gets 20 points just based off that. So, yeah, I think you have to go over here. I don't really want to take overs on every single game with 50-point totals, but there's just nothing here that says, oh, yeah, this is a good spot maybe to go under. And again, this is another game where I think it'll be faster pace, more passing. Give me the over.
Overs are more fun. It's understandable.
They are more
Julian,
fun.
over
They
or
are.
under?
It's
50?
true. They're more fun.
Over.
I mean, Jeff's made all fair points. I don't know what are the Falcons? Like, they just scored 6 points at home against the Eagles, and they're going to be playing from behind, I think, no doubt in this game. And I do love Jeff's point about the Tampa secondary kind of got hot on that playoff run, but was an issue throughout the regular season last year and was an issue against Dallas once again in that opening game. So Calvin Ridley can get loose for some scores. Kyle Pitts maybe gets more involved than his debut. But the pressure that the Bucs should get on Matt Ryan is going to be ridiculous. I have no idea what to do with what to do with Atlanta, what they're going to be good for in this game. So if I'm betting an over here, I'm strictly looking to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team total because we know what Tampa is. We know what Tampa can do. And I can't get Atlanta involved in this point. I cannot trust Jeff's beloved Falcons in any way.
How about you, Reed? How do you feel about 52 points over or under Atlanta at Tampa?
Yeah, if Jeff had it his way, then why even roll out the defenses? Just every 50 over, like every 50 total, just go over. How can you go under? But
Flag football, baby. Let's go.
Exactly.
By the way, to Julian's point, Tampa's total right now is at 32.5.
Yeah, and that's a solid point by Edlo. I think if you want to go and take the over on something that you feel confident about, I do think it's that Tampa Bay. Also, Mike Davis props. He might get like 10 catches in this game, right? Like that's the stuff that you have to think about if you're scared off this game total. I am inclined though to side with Jeff on the over on this one, just because I could see Tampa Bay putting up 40 points. Right, like this team is going to pass a ton, and it doesn't matter what the game script is because of the weapons that they have, which means that Atlanta, even though they only scored 6, Julian, they just need to put like 7 on the board, 7 more, on the board than last week, and progressively get a little better. Could they score 0? Absolutely, right? Because this this offensive line gave up 11 pressures on Matt Ryan on the inside. And Vita Vea, we saw what he did on Thursday night. This guy's an absolute monster. So Matt Ryan might be in store for a very long, long day. But at the same time, I'm going to side with Jeff here. I'm going to go on the over because I just think Tampa Bay is just too good right now on the offensive side of the ball.
All right, finally, 2 teams that put up some serious points in week 1. They face off in week 2. The Niners are visiting the Eagles. Game totals at 50 points. Philly put up 32 against Atlanta, as we just discussed, and then San Fran, they scored 41 against the Lions. That game was pretty much in hand until the final 2 minutes. Were those just results of a product of facing bad teams, Julian, or can these teams easily put up 50 in week 2 combined?
I think some of it was a result of facing bad teams. The 49ers aren't a team that's gonna flirt with 40 points every week, and the Eagles are one of the more inconsistent teams in the NFL. So I don't want to bank too much on what happened in week 1, but this game is my favorite over of the week, and it's already been bet up like 4.5 points from the opening line. So there's a lot of sharp money actually that has come in on this total. But given how both of these offenses play, I think we're going to see a lot of plays in this game. San Francisco wasn't afraid to really pass the ball in week 1, and they just lost Mostert. And then you have the Eagles that came out and looked really good, showed really well offensively in week 1. You've got some defensive questions on both sides of the ball. San Francisco down a lot of defensive pieces yet again, lost some in week 1 in that game against the Lions. So I don't think I'm gonna be betting on any of these other totals. I'm very interested in actually placing a wager on the Philly San Francisco over.
All right, Reed, 50 points. Philly hosting San Francisco, over or under?
Yeah, this one's tough. I have less conviction than Julian on this one, just because both of these teams faced right in their matchups defenses and on the offensive side for Atlanta that they just didn't really show us anything, right? So what is the real San Francisco 49ers and Philadelphia Eagles? We just don't know yet. Both of these offensive lines though are top 10, right? They're solid on the offensive line. So to that point, to Julian's point, when you have that good of a unit, you can do anything that you really want, right? You can run, you can pass with efficiency. The only thing that scares me on this over is Jalen Hurts. His average completion last week was bottom third in the NFL of eligible and starting quarterbacks. That does scare me a little bit, but again, injuries in the back or in the secondary for San Francisco. I'm going to lean towards the over on this one.
Jeff, take us home.
Look, I swear to God, there are some under totals that I like this week. Like I like the Rams Indy under. I like the Bills Dolphins, but like this is not one of the games that I like for an under. I think one of the things that we saw San Francisco week 1, maybe their defense isn't going to be quite as good as people think, especially that secondary, man. I mean, when you're allowing Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions to kind of just have their way with you late in the game, there's going to be some question marks. San Francisco is going to get in a lot of shootouts this year. And look, the Eagles secondary performed great week 1. It's not that good a unit. There's no way they're going to lead the league in like yards per attempt and stuff like that against. So again, this is a game where Julian's right. If you got on it early under 50, that's great. But even at 50, I'm not going under here. I have to go over. So again, hopefully we'll get to those other games later in the week. But for now, you can just call me Mr. Over because we'll do a full sweep. Give me the over in this one too.
Big over guy, Jeff Ulrich.
Big
Gentlemen,
over guy.
thank you. Thank you very much. Good to see all of you today.
Thank you, Brendan.
Problem. All right, we'll be back in just a bit here on The Sweat. We have RotoWire senior golf writer Len Hochberg joining me next. Okay, to wrap up this Wednesday edition of The Sweat, we're talking some golf. We have RotoWire senior writer Len Hochberg, joining us now. Hi, Len. Good to see you.
Hi, Brendan. Good to see you.
We're going to chase or fade, okay? PGA Tour style. We're going to take a look at the first official event of the 2021-2022 season, the Fortinet Championship. Len, this field not too shabby for the first PGA Tour event of the season. World number 1, Jon Rahm, he leads the salaries this week. $12,100. The next closest, Hideki Matsuyama at $11K. The question for you, do you chase Rahm at this ridiculous price and fade Matsuyama, or fade Rahm and then chase Hideki? What do you think?
Well, it's just good to be back after the eternal golf off season, that we are back to golf. So that is the paramount and the most important thing. And Fortinet is the new sponsor for this season opening event, and quite a welcome to the PGA Tour gift in the form of world number 1, Jon Rahm. I don't think a lot of people expected Rahm to be in this tournament with the Ryder Cup next week, but he is here. He's the only Ryder Cupper who was in the field at $12,100. That is a lot to pay, but he plays well every week. His good weeks are top 5s. His bad weeks are top 10s. Matsuyama, I kind of like as well. This tournament does not put a premium on putting, which always makes Matsuyama more of a factor. And granted, he is $1,100 cheaper than Rahm, but Rahm is the safer play. I would chase Rahm if you're asking me to chase one.
All right, after those top guys, you find in the 10K range, Webb Simpson will. Chase.
Broke up there a little bit, but I think I got the gist of that.
Sorry, I'll give it to you again. My bad. Internet's always a good time here, huh? Webb Simpson, Will Zalatoris, Kevin Na. Who would you chase?
Yeah, this tournament puts a premium on scrambling and strokes gained around the green. We see a strong correlation every year between those stats and success. Simpson and Na, really, really elite in that category. The Will Zalatoris, not bad, but not as good as the other two. I would eliminate Zalatoris from that equation before the other two. Webb Simpson did not have a great year last year, but did come on sneaky quiet at the end of the season with top 20s in 4 of his last 5 tournaments. Kevin Na probably still reeling, heartbroken, crestfallen from being snubbed for the Ryder Cup. You wonder how he will channel those emotions. I think he will channel them in the proper way to do well this week. And so deciding between Simpson and Na, the edge for me, Na $800 cheaper. I like Na to chase of those 3.
Okay, moving down the list now, Len, of salaries. We look at some guys with past success. You have Cam Champ in 2019, Tway in 2018, Steele back-to-back years in 16 and 17, Grillo in 2015. All are in the field this week. So which winner would you chase?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because these are not guys who are near each other in salary. Champ and Grillo up around $9,000. Brendan Steele, the 2-time champ, in the lower 7s, and Kevin Tway in the mid 6s. So there's a lot of variables there. Just right off the top of the 4, I would say Champ and Steele are my 2 favorites. Big price differential between the two, $1,600 might give me the edge to Steele, but overall, just apples for apples. Cameron Champ, clearly the best guy of those 4.
Who are some value plays, Len, you're chasing for this event?
Well, this is always a fun time of year and a difficult time of year because we get to see a lot of new golfers. All the Korn Ferry grads are coming out of the woodwork here. There are 50 of them. All 50 might be in this tournament or pretty close to it. That's 1/3 of the field. And some of these guys are certainly known. We've seen them on the PGA Tour. They're European guys, international guys. We know some of the names. But 3 of them who I like this week and maybe going forward, Taylor Moore, $7,700. Kind of a high price, but he finished in the top 10 in 6 of his last 7 events. He also was top 6 on the Korn Ferry Tour in scrambling and total driving. 2 important stats to consider this week. Grayson Sigg, $7,100. I'm surprised his price is that low. He won the Boise Open, a playoff event. He had 2 wins on tour, the Korn Ferry Tour last year. He is the latest in the long line, the pipeline out of the University of Georgia, another Bulldog. And at 5'7", 180 pounds, he kind of looks like a Bulldog. And Lee Hodges, $6,600. He tied for 4th in his final event last season, the Korn Ferry Tour Championship. What I really like about Lee Hodges, he played 4 PGA Tour events last season, made every cut, top 15 in 2 of them. Granted, they were the lesser events, Puerto Rico, Punta Cana, and the like, but he showed he can compete on the PGA Tour. Lee Hodges, $6,600.
Len, recommended fade for this tournament.
Yeah, I'm really surprised or mildly surprised that Cameron Tringali is $9,700. I realize this isn't a deep field and somebody's got to be $9,700. And Tringali did have a good season last year, but it wasn't the best toward the end. And more importantly for me, at this tournament, he plays every year. The last 6 years, he's missed 2 cuts. He has not been able to crack the top 40 in this tournament in 6 years. So I don't go anywhere near 9,700. And just below him at 9,500, Mark Leishman. He just has not been great the last year and a half. He's certainly a big name, an elite name, but outside the top 150 in strokes gained around the green, off the tee, outside the top 100 in greens in regulation, he just has not been the same guy as we know from a couple of years ago. 9,500, way high.
Okay, before we let you go, we need your Slate-approved pick. Who do you like to win the Fortinet Championship and pick up the first win of the 2021-2022 PGA Tour?
Well, reporters always root for a good story. And would there be a better story than Kevin Na snubbed Kevin Na for the Ryder Cup team to win the Fortinet Championship the week before the Ryder Cup. That would be the best story possible. That would really get golf Twitter going crazy heading into the Ryder Cup. That's not the only reason I'm picking Kevin Na. Kevin Na, well suited for this course, even though he's not a long hitter. He's played well in the past. He's got a runner-up. He's got a third. He's got a seventh, all a number of years back, but he's shown he can play well in this tournament. And I think he is really, really motivated and pissed off that he wasn't picked for the Ryder Cup team. He will channel that to victory, and boy, that would be something coming into this week.
Okay, Len and Joy, thanks so much for the time. The first Madden Sim of the day coming your way in just a minute. Eagles, Cowboys at noon. It's the first of 6 on the docket on our DraftKings channels, YouTube, Twitch, also the Game Center. We do have the slate today at 5 Eastern. Emerson Latzia, Reed Fowler, Jeff Ulrich. They're breaking down Fortinet Championship coverage and also look ahead to the 2021 Ryder Cup coming up next week. Brendan Glasheen saying so long. Thanks for watching The Sweat. We'll catch you tomorrow.